Today is Friday, March 21st, 2025. And today I came across this news story where District Attorney Jeff Rosen has been denied an effort that he has been working towards for a few years now to have people who have been convicted and sentenced to death have their sentences reduced to life imprisonment. And today, this plea for Richard Farley was denied. But before I say more about that, let me share a post from Facebook from a couple of days ago. I want to be clear about two things. One, the blanket charge is failure to protect, whatever that looks like for you in your individual situation. And two, you cannot trust someone who has been caught to be sincere in any confession or declaration they make, because being caught means they have avoided accountability. A person who has avoided being held accountable will say anything to avoid being held accountable. There is no negotiation, especially if the evidence cannot be disputed. These people have no suitable offering that would make obvious their willingness to change, as far as I'm concerned. You cannot be certain they will not commit the same offense and harm someone else again. How do you come up with a corrective action rehabilitative plan for someone who refuses to honestly admit what they understand about how their behavior has hurt people? At a minimum, can they name the people, anyone they hurt, as a comparison to people who have come forward and name them as the cause of their loss, abuse, and/or suffering? Capital punishment, also called judicial homicide, is a sanctionable punishment in the United States judicial system. It is not native in its origins because Native American justice is relationally based. Death as punishment is how crimes against humanity are dealt with in the system of governance created by forefathers of the nation people refuse to let go of in America. I just wanted to mention that to consider in context. Thanks. Some things I'd like to highlight about this case are that Jeff Rosen was previously successful in getting 12 death row sentences reclassified to life in prison without parole. But the article also mentioned that of the 17 death row inmates who were eligible, 4 of them declined to participate. And so my question is, why would they decline to participate in having their sentences reduced to life in prison? What do you imagine life in prison with no opportunity for parole would be like? In this article, Rosen also says that he decided to take this on because in the wake of the 2020 killings of George Floyd, he began to understand the country's history of slavery and lynching and found that his views on capital punishment were shifting. Here's an article from January 2025 with more background on this story. the more poignant point. It says the death row prisoners cost about $184 million more per year than those sentenced to life in prison without parole due to capital trials and their appeals, the public legal representation that's provided for them, and enhanced death row security, which costs taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars in haphazard, discriminatory, and unreliable efforts, which he views only grease the machinery of the system with money that is desperately needed elsewhere. I suppose my question here is, why isn't our system rehabilitative? Why is our system so irredeemably broken? Since January, people have been focused on money, lying, and keeping their jobs. But the bigger issue is, why is the system of governance in this country so broken? And what are we going to do about it? There is a special kind of sickness in someone who believes that life in prison without parole should ever even be an option. It's like keeping people in cages. For what purpose? I'm not sure, but I hope I have given you something to contemplate. Let me conclude with the testimony of a man who has received a sentence of life in prison without parole and how he has chosen to use his time.
How do you wish to plead to murder in the second case? Guilty? Yes, sir.
We're in Saginaw, Michigan, where 51-year-old Stephen Sanderson just pled guilty to the murder of another inmate inside a state correctional facility. 10 months earlier, Sanderson, who was already serving life without parole for the 1991 murder of his girlfriend, attacked and strangled his 67-year-old cellmate. He says he did it for a very specific reason.
The reason I killed him was because he was a child molester.
His cellmate, Theodore Dyer, was convicted of first-degree criminal sexual conduct in 2014 for molesting a 9-year-old girl who lived next door to him.
He was my bunkie, and I had found out that he was in prison for child molestation, a really bad case. So that night he was trying to justify why he did it, and I just told him to be quiet, and he would have to leave in the morning to find a new cell. But he continued to talk about it and try to justify it. So he was a little bit bigger than me, so I got down and I hit him in his face a few times, and when he fell, I wrapped a cord around his neck and I took his life.
As a formality of his guilty plea, Sanderson's lawyer then confirms the basics.
But you did in fact kill him.
Oh, sure.
And you intended to kill him.
Oh, sure, yes.
2 weeks later at sentencing, Sanderson's matter-of-fact demeanor continues as he addresses the public response he received following the murder.
Since this all happened, it's kind of been, people think I'm some kind of hero, and I'm actually not. I just, did what I thought was best in the time that I was given. I don't feel bad for what I did, I feel bad for maybe his family or something, but as far as remorse towards him, no.
Sanderson then claims Theodore Dyer's real judgment is still to come.
I've been getting these emails saying that, it's not my position to judge anybody, and I want to make it quite clear that I didn't judge him. I know God is the only judge we have. I just set the appointment up.
Without comment, the judge then issued Stephen Sanderson the maximum penalty of an additional life sentence to be added to his previous sentence of life without parole.